Hey everyone, welcome to another Intro to Java Programming video. In this video, we're going to put together a whole bunch of pieces to get you ready to do your translator project. And it's going to incorporate using JText fields, JText areas, buttons, arrays, inputs and outputs, searches, and all kinds of really cool stuff. I have a completed project here for you that you can look at. And what we're going to do, though, is we're going to recreate this just sort of line by line, looking at the original JFrame. Okay, you have this code already, but I want you to type along with me and recreate this code, because I feel that typing out the code really helps you solidify the knowledge instead of just reading it along with me. Okay, so let's run it first and see what it looks like. It's called Text Input Basics. And what I've got here is I've got an input field where I can type some words and then hit submit. There we go. And once I submit a whole bunch of data into this field, I can hit finish. And what's going to happen is it will print all of those words out here on the JText area. And you can see that it's going to disable these two buttons, so I can't add more data. Okay, once it's finished, I can't add more data. But now I've got a search field up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type something into the search field, sum, and hit search. And if it's found, it's going to just print out the word sum. Let's say I type in something that's not on there. It's going to say not found. All right, so if I type in the, which is on that list, it's going to print out the. If I type in my name and then hit search, it's going to say not found because my name is not on that list. Clear? All right, so I've got a GUI here that is a border layout. It has a panel up here, which is my search panel. It's got a panel down here, which is my input panel. It's got a JText area here, which is my output area. And then in the input area, I've got a label that says input. I've got a text field. I've got two buttons. In my search, I have a label that says search for data. I've got a field, which is for my input for my search. I've got a search button. And then I've got a label that will output the text or output not found. Okay? So now we can analyze this and try and determine the components that we need. I know for sure that I'm going to need 3 separate panels, because JPanels, what we've been using them for is holding GUI components and then placing them into different areas of our GUI. All right, JPanels are really just holders that allow us to compartmentalize our GUI and break it up into nice, easy to move around pieces. Okay, so I made one panel for my search, one panel for my output, one panel for my input. All right, how about we get started? Let's make a new file. Let's call it data input and search. That's a terrible name, but it's okay. Data input and search. Click OK. And we need to start off by making this a JFrame. I'm going to close all these because they're bugging me. So to make it a JFrame, we do what we always do. Extends JFrame. All right. Now, when it's a JFrame, we know that we need to import things. So if you put your cursor on top of where it says JFrame and hold Alt and hit Enter, you can choose import class and it'll import it. So I'm just going to import everything from Swing. Then I don't have to do any more import statements because I'm going to use a lot of Swing components here. All right, I'm going to set up my main method. And in the main method, I'm going to do the stuff that I always do in a main method. So instantiate my frame object. I'm going to set default close operation, exit on close. I don't need the Windows constants thing. I'll just do exit on close. I need to, I should probably set preferred size. And I'll make it, I don't know, I'll just start at 600 wide by 400 high, and we'll see how that works. And then I will pack, and then I will set visible. So I've got the basics of my frame set up in here. Okay? I know that I'm probably going to want to have a setup GUI method, so I'll actually just create one right off the start, because I always do whenever I'm doing a GUI. You've seen that. So I'll go public void setup GUI, and I'm not going to do anything in there right now, but it'll be there so I can just call it. Okay. So I've got the basics in place for my frame, and now I can start building everything that I need. If we look at this, we can see all the things we need. I said I needed 3 panels for sure. I needed my search panel, I needed my output panel, and I needed my input panel. So these are going to be J panels. I'm going to make them instance variables so that I can use them anywhere in the frame. Private J panel, input panel, output panel, search panel. Okay? So I've got my panels. If I look at this, I've got 3 buttons. I've got the search button, the submit data button, and the finish button. So I'll make those. Search button, what did I call that one? Submit button, and finish button. Those are my 3 buttons that I need. Okay? I know that I need some J labels. The search field label, the search output label, and the input label. Search field label, search output label, and then input label. So I've got my buttons, my panels, and my labels. What else do I have? I have J text fields. So I've got 2 text fields. I've got my search field and my input field. So I've got my search field and my input field. Excellent. So I've got my panels, my buttons, my labels, my fields. Is there anything else? Yes, I've got my big text area right here. So I've got a J text area. And I'm going to call that output text. There we go. I'll make that private. Sometimes I forget to do that because I'm not making this multi-class. It doesn't really matter, but it's just good form and good to get in the habit of making your instance variables private. Okay, so I've got all my instance variables set up. I've got my main method set up. Now it's time to actually create my GUI. And in order to do so, I'm probably going to make several different methods. I'm going to make a method for my JButtons, a method for my labels, a method for my text field, and a method for my area here. So public void setup buttons. It takes nothing, it gives nothing. And I'm going to copy all these just so that I have them down there, so I don't have to think about them. So search button gets new JButton, and then I'll give it a label. I'll just type in search. Submit button is next. Gets new JButton. Submit. And then finish button gets new JButton. Finish. And there we go. We've got our buttons created. Now we have to do the rest of the stuff, which means we have to add them and we have to add action listeners. So I'll go in the, let's see, well, they're going to be in different places, aren't they? So the search button, I'm going to set up the buttons first. I'm just going to create them, and then I'll add them later on when I set up my panels, okay? But I will add action listeners to them. Search button dot add action listener this. Now, it's going to be an error because this is not an action listener yet, okay? When I say this, I'm referring to this class, data input and search, and it's not an action listener. So I need to implement that. Implements action listener. Now when I do this, as you know, I immediately have to implement action performed. So I can hit Alt and Enter and do implement methods, choose action performed. Or I could just manually type this out down at the bottom. I recommend you do that. Get in the habit of manually typing out until you know it by heart. Then you can do the Alt Enter stuff. But public void action performed takes in action event E, and then you've got the override above it because you're overriding the action performed from the superclass. I'm not going to do anything in action performed yet. I just needed to have it so that I've got a functioning add action listener. So I'm going to add action listener to search, to submit, and to finish. And there we go. So I've got my buttons instantiated and I've got the action listeners added to them. The last thing I have to do is actually add them to their required components, and I'll worry about that later on. Okay, so I set up my buttons. Now I'm going to set up my fields, which is going to be very similar. And I have just two text fields, search field and input field. Search field gets new JText field, and I'm going to make it 15 long. And then input field gets new JText field, and that's going to be 15 long as well. And once again, I'm not going to actually add these to any of the panels until I make those panels. I'll worry about that later, but I can't forget about that. Then I'm going to make my my labels, which were search field label, search output label, and input label. set up labels, and it's called search field label, gets new JLabel, and let's see, what did I call it before? The search field label just says search for data. So that's what I'm going to put in there. There we go. And then I've got the search output label. And by default, it has nothing in it. It's not going to have anything in it until I actually perform a search. So I'm just going to put empty quotes there. You can do that. But you do have to put a string in there, either an empty string or some words for a label to work. And the last one was, what was it? Input label? Yeah, input label. Input label gets new JLabel. I'm just going to put input data, or how about this? Enter some strings. Enter a string. There we go. So I've created my labels, I've created my fields, I've created my buttons and added the action listeners to them. Now, what else do I have? I've got my JPanels and my output area. You know, I'm going to do the output area in with the fields. It just kind of makes sense because an area is kind of like a field. Output area gets new JText area. And I'm going to make it 15 by 15. And you can see that the tooltip shows that the first argument there is for rows. It tells you how many rows that area is going to have. And the second argument says columns. That means it's going to have 15 columns. So what I mean by that is you can have 15 rows of text and it'll be 15 columns wide. Okay, so that's what my JText area is. All right, so I've got all those things created. Now I've got to create my JPanels. So I will make a new method. Set up panels. And in here is where I'm going to instantiate my panels and then add everything to those panels. So I'll go inputs panel gets new JPanel, new flow layout. They're all going to have flow layouts. Output panel gets new JPanel, new flow layout. And then search panel gets new JPanel, new flow layout. So this stuff is not new. I'm not going to explain it. We've made JPanels before. It's no different than anything else. Now that I've made the JPanels, I've made all my components, I'm going to start adding the things into those panels. So why am I doing this here? Why didn't I add all the buttons here and then everything there? Well, you can see that these things are in a very particular order. And when we've got a flow layout, whatever order you add those components in is the order that they're going to show up in the frame itself. And I feel that I have more control over that when I do that all here in setup labels. So that's just what I'm going to do. And what I'm going to do is underneath the search field, oops, wrong one. I need to be in setup panels. Underneath the search panel, or the inputs panel, I'll start with the inputs panel. I'm going to look at all of the components that I need in inputs. And I need to have the input label, the input field, then the submit button, and the finish button in that order. So I'm going to do that right here. I'm going to go input panel dot add, and then I'm going to start with the input label. Then I'm going to go input panel dot add input field, because you can see the order in which they show up in that panel is label, field, then submit button, then finish button. So that's the order in which I have to add them here. If I add them in a different order, they'll show up in that other order. So input panel dot add, submit button, that's called button, whatever, I don't care. Input panel dot add finish button. So there, I've added everything to the inputs panel. Excellent. Now I'm going to add everything to the outputs panel. And the only thing in the output panel here is my JText area. So I'll go output panel dot add output area. And then I have to finish up the search panel. Search panel dot add, and let's take a look at the order in which they're added. I added the search field label, then the search field, then the search button, and the search output label. So the first thing is going to be search field label. I'm going to actually just copy this and I'm going to paste it a few times. Okay, search panel add, and then I just need to add search field. And then it's going to be search button. And one more. It's going to be, what was it called? Search output label. There we go. So I've added everything now in the correct order to my search panel. So I've got my inputs panel created. I'm adding all the things to the input panel. I've got my output panel created. I'm adding everything to the output panel. I've got my search panel created. I'm adding everything to the search panel. And I've got to add all these things to the frame. Now, the frame is going to be a border layout, so I should probably do that. And I could do that up here if I want to, or I could do it in the setup panels. So I think I'll just do that in setup panels. Set layout, new border layout. Now, when I just call set layout, that means it's calling that method to the JFrame class. It's implicitly doing it. It'd be the same thing as just doing this dot set layout. That's saying that this class is going to have the layout set to that. Okay? So I'm setting the layout here. And I might even do that right at the top of this method. So it's the first thing that you see. Then I'm going to create my panels and all that kind of stuff. Now that I've got that border layout set to my frame, I'm going to add these panels to the frame. And what I think I want to do it this way. This time I want to put the output at the top, I want to put the search down at the bottom, and I want to put the inputs in the middle and see what that looks like. So I'll go add output panel, border layout dot north, add input panel, border layout, and I said I wanted the input panel to be in the center. Add search panel, border layout south. Now let's take a look at what this looks like. Okay, let's see if it actually works. Well, it's not going to do anything yet. Actually, I'll run it so you can just see what it does. It'll do a whole lot of nothing. It's going to give us a frame. The frame's got nothing in it. Why doesn't it have anything in it? Because our setup GUI method, even though it's called here, never calls on any of these different setup methods. So I've got to do these. I'm going to first set up buttons, set up fields, set up labels, set up panels, and let's see if I've got all of them. So I had buttons, fields, labels, and panels. And those are all the setup methods. So all the setup methods are now called in my setup GUI. Now imagine if I did all of this code in the setup GUI method. That method would be enormous. it would be hard to read and hard to edit. So that's why I'm breaking down my setup GUI into 4 sub-methods or 4 helper methods. It helps to further compartmentalize or further just break down my code. It allows it to be much more readable and much more editable and supportable. So now when I run this, I should have a GUI here. All right, so I've got my JText area here. I've got my my inputs here, and then I've got my search right here. It kind of looks sort of ugly. I don't like the spacing of it. Maybe I could make it a little smaller. Let's see what happens if I just comment this out. All right, so things look a little bit better here. They're packed a little bit more neatly. So let's talk about what the pack does. The pack is going to make the J-frame exactly the size that it needs to be. Okay? If we set a set preferred size, however, that's going to override the pack. So sometimes you could use pack only, or you could set preferred size instead of pack. I'm just going to use pack in this case because I don't know how tall exactly my GUI is going to be. I just know that I want the GUI to be tall enough for all of its components. So there you have it. I have a non-functioning GUI. Okay, I've got the input fields here, I've got the labels here, I've got my buttons, and then this is all going to function in a little bit. But it doesn't do what I want it to do yet. We'll get to that in the next video. Thanks for watching.